Good evening, everybody. Welcome
Woo-hoo!
back to Hoops HD Bracket Rundown Show. This is our weekly show we've been doing since January, where we go ahead and put together a bracket, or at least a C-list, if not a full bracket, live on the air on tape delay. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by everybody. David Griggs and Matt Sikowski up top, John Titel right below me, along with John Slika and Joby Fortson off to the sides there.
Where are you, Chad? I can't see. You over
I'm
there?
in the,
Or
well, I'm not
over
quite in
there?
the center square. Last week we had a center square. We're not quite doing Hollywood squares, more Brady Bunch square.
Okay.
I think Chad was playing with the buttons early on because I could have sworn I was muted before we went on the air.
This is our bracket rundown show. The way that this show works is, at least for this week, this is what we're doing is we'll call it consensus bracket version of the show. What I had was each of our panelists, myself included, we all put together a 1 through 50 list of our top 50 teams in the nation. I then kind of did a cross-country scoring the way you would do for an AP or a coach's polled ballot or the like, to come up with a consensus list of the top 50, 55 teams or so. Went ahead, added in the single bid teams, and came up with a bracket as well as a top handful of teams that missed the bracket. And David, you want to make a point about how we choose these teams?
Yeah, we do bracketology two different ways at Hoops HD. Most sites try and guess the actual committee. We do that here as well. I say we. John Titel does that. He does it better than anyone, by the way. And if you don't believe me, just look at the scores. But we also do a format like this where we're not trying to guess the committee at all. We are saying this is what the field would look like if we were the committee. And honestly, our field's going to be better than the real committees. It always is.
Right. You know what, let me take 2 seconds here before we actually start the bracket reveal. I want to run through each of us here. I think we should have done this every week, and I always kind of forget about it. But I want to through each of you and kind of tell us what you really look at when you're evaluating teams. Is there one thing that you look at, or is it a combination of things? And Matt, I think I know what your answer is, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, no, I am fairly big on the metrics. I'll admit that. I'll still look at wins. Like, for instance, a certain team with the last nickname of Cougars was rated pretty highly in KenPom. However, they have beaten absolutely no one, and I actually did not consider them. But for the most part, metrics are still a thing. Wins play, and then I try to see each of these teams play and at least form some kind of opinion whether the metrics back that up or if I think they're a little bit of an outlier.
All right, Joby, you're right below Matt on the. You were right below Matt on the screen. At least, why don't you come in next?
And this is why it's kind of fun because Matt and I look at pretty much. I mean, not differently because we both value what the other values, but we place greater value on opposite things. I am very much in that wins column. Are you beating teams in the field? Is one I really look at. I think the committee does too. Not that to hide behind it because we aren't trying to mimic them, but quality wins also, for me, are more important than bad losses. Bad losses matter, but a huge win outweighs a bad loss. And so I look at that. I look at wins as a big component. And the other element is eye test matters to me, especially in the protected seed level lines 1 through 4. Metrics are the breakdown of a resume really hits home as we fill out the field.
All right.
What did you accomplish?
Titel, how about you?
I don't only look at one thing, and frankly, if somebody is only looking at one thing, I don't think they're a good bracketologist. It's because it would be so easy, and it's not that easy. Wins and losses are important. Gee, really, thanks, John. If a team like Gonzaga is getting a bunch of wins, but they're over nobodies, then even if they're undefeated, which of course they no longer are, they can't rise to a 1 seed. The fact is when you beat Florida and Iowa State and Arizona and have no losses, you are a 1 seed. If you are beating a bunch of average teams and beat a couple of tourney teams like a UCLA, that sounds like an Arizona profile. And if you keep losing to good teams but only be UCLA, as much as I want you to be a 1 seed, you cannot be a 1 seed.
All right, Stalika, anything else that you look at?
Well, I'm looking at who you beat, especially protected seeds in the case of the higher teams, where you beat them and how consistently you've been beating them. And in the cases of teams where they have some injuries, are these going to be temporary temporary hiccups? Are they going to be permanent? So in the case of my own Xavier Musketeers, I have to look at who they are right now a little bit more than who they were earlier in this season.
I'll tell you that myself, it's, I kind of always done what the three things that Mark Hollis actually said in an interview earlier this year. Who'd you play, who'd you beat, and where'd you play them? It's maybe oversimplifies it a little bit, especially in some stranger cases, like a team like Wichita State that we'll definitely be discussing at some point tonight. But I think that's the starting point. I do look at the metrics, especially the predictive ones, but even all the metrics, it's something that you look at. I almost look at it something as more of, am I missing something because I have a real high metric, as opposed to using the metrics to choose my teams. David, we know that you just pick teams out of the hat, though, correct?
Sometimes. Sometimes it's who gives me tickets. I like to look at coaches. If Tim Miles is your coach, I tend to look favorably on your program. But I think what John Teitel said is right. Like, there's certain things you might emphasize more than others, and I kind of do it subjectively, which there's no way to come up with a metric that would match how I rank the teams, because this may seem – I look at kind of like what you said with Mark Hollis. How hard is it to win the games that you won? And not so much how good are the teams that you're playing, because some teams are really good, like they're in the top 50, but playing them at home is a lot easier to win. Like if it's a team like Michigan that only has 1 or 2 road wins, even though they're better than William and Mary, who hasn't lost at home. So not so much who are you playing, although I do look at that too, is how hard is it to win the games that you've won. And we're going to get into this later, but whereas Middle Tennessee, you look at the surface of their profile, it doesn't look that impressive. But when you look at, that they've won at UAB and they've won at Marshall and they've won at some places that combined have won over 75% of their games at home, I tend to think, well, those were 4 or 5 games that were collectively pretty hard to win. I like that.
Okay, well, that's fair. But let me do this now is let's go ahead and pull up the screen that we're going to be using tonight, and it should be coming up on the screen right about now. And that is the – it's not on the screen yet?
It's not on the screen. It's still a black screen, Chad. What are you doing, Chad? I can't see the bracket, Chad.
David, why don't you look at your computer screen?
Yeah, it says Chad Schroeder started screen sharing. Double click. Wait a minute. Am I not? I'm actually not seeing it. Is everybody else seeing it?
No. Chad, we really
Okay.
Great stuff we got going on here, Chad.
I'm seeing a nice red button that says recording.
Yeah,
Okay, we have a little minor problem here. Let me try to get through this hiccup here for a second. But Dave, well, let me ask each of you here. While I'm trying to get this up here, I can actually tell you the first thing that's going to happen is that we actually had a rare tie in this in our rankings between our top 2 teams in the nation. We had 3 of us voted them, one team won and the other one 2. The other 3 voted the other way, and that was Villanova and Kansas, obviously. David, which one did you go with?
My overall number 1, Kansas. Yeah. And again, it's just the win at Kentucky and the win at Baylor. As good as Villanova's wins are, they're not really as good as those 2. I just think that overall Kansas has been the best, but they're both really good. Okay.
Are we back now?
Yep, we're back.
Okay, so we're going to try again with the screen share. As I kind of gave away a bit of a hint there. I think we should.
Oh, there it is.
There,
Chad, you got it on the screen.
Okay, we got him on the screen now. I did give it away here, but we had it. It was
ruined the show for everyone.
A complete dead heat between Villanova and
ruined Christmas, Chad.
I had to make a call. I went with the RPI. That was the best tiebreaker I could come up with. So Villanova did end up being our number 1 team overall, and Kansas number 2 overall. Joby, which way did you go with this?
I went with Villanova. Just the depth of their wins got to me, and the fact is, it's not like you had weak wins in that mix. The top of the Big East is very strong, but on top of it, out of conference, yes, maybe I'm biased, but that Virginia win was a nice middle of the season break that just showed, hey, out of conference at full strength, against another team that's competing for a protected seed, we can deliver a win. And they've won against more teams in the field than anybody else by 2. They've beaten 2 more teams than anybody else who are at least in my field.
All right. And I could actually, if anybody wants us to, I've got another screen here we could flip to where we could take a look at some of these profiles, as I got thrown off a little bit by some of our technical problems there. But here is Villanova and Kansas profiles. Matt, you look at that. I guess the only difference is in some of those predictive ratings that you like, where Villanova does score much higher than Kansas.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, I was one who had Villanova #1, and I simply think they're the better team. That's this predictive rating, but watching, I'm like, I had Kansas at the start of the year as my national champion and have actually soured on them a little bit during the season. I thought they'd be a little bit better with their big man play, and frankly, I think I've been lucky to win a couple of these Big 12 games. I don't think they're 2 or 3 games better than the Big 12, despite what the standings would show.
Well, let me go ahead and show our #3 team overall, and that is Gonzaga, still at #3 despite the finally suffering a loss. And Tytel, you kind of addressed them earlier already, and is that the reason why you think they are still a 1 seed?
They are. I mean, if BYU was a 20-loss team, I could see you drop for them. They're a 20-win team. I know it was at home, but it was single digits, and I still think I still can't believe that Gonzaga lost that game. Like, I really think if they played them 10 more times, they'd win 9 out of 10. But obviously, stuff happens, and you have to a loss is a loss. So I think they belong on the 1 line.
Well, they are the 1 seed. The final 1 seed was the North Carolina Tar Heels. Stalika, they did get in there. There was only one person that actually voted somebody else on the 1 line, which we'll get to in a second here. But, Carolina, despite a loss, still remains on the 1 seed like they were last week.
Yeah, when I look at teams like Gonzaga and North Carolina side by side, the Zags actually have 2 wins against protected seeds in Florida and Arizona. North Carolina has 3 of them if you look at Florida State, Notre Dame, and Louisville. But at the same time, I think 6 losses is a lot to remain on the #1 line. But I still have them up there for now by virtue of being the leader in the toughest conference in the country.
Well, and David, one of the questions you have with North Carolina is who else did you put up there? But I think you wanted to make a case for somebody else, don't you?
I did. I had UCLA ahead of them. And when you just look at North Carolina's profile, it has those wins on it, but they have them at home. And I realize that it's just that it's not that they didn't win those games on the road. It's that their best road win is against a team that's a fringe bubble team in Wake Forest. That's their best true road win. Everybody else has beaten somebody away from home that is either a protected seed like Gonzaga. I know those weren't true road wins, but they did win at St. Mary's. That alone is a better road win than what North Carolina has. UCLA won at Rupp Arena. They won at Arizona. And I know that they didn't win the game, but they would have had a 3rd overall win against a high protected seed had it not been for a last-second shot at Oregon. And really, when you look at UCLA, is that who we're looking at now? Where's the bad on their profile? There isn't any. The loss at USC isn't horrible. And, I think that it's at least comparable to North Carolina's loss at Georgia Tech. When I look at them side by side, I think UCLA's done more.
Well, here's my hang-up with UCLA right here. I mean, yes, they have quite a few good wins, but they didn't really put together a strong non-conference schedule outside of the made-for-TV matchup. So that's one of the major problems I have with them.
And yes, and these are athletic directors on this committee, and they seem to really look at how a team schedules. But I still think that they've done enough to indicate that they belong up here.
Well, Joby, I want to bring you in on UCLA because you had them ranked on the 3 line.
Yep, I don't like their defense. This is where the eye test comes in. I mean, I think UCLA is primed not to be that.
Well, I don't like their uniforms either, but I mean, that isn't really what we're looking at.
They don't play good defense, plain and simple. They don't. And they're going to run across a team, some scrappy team like Oklahoma State or something, and get beaten in the second round. And they will. They are not a Final Four team. And their resume, the problem is also is the Pac-12 once you get beyond the top three and then that fringe bubble team that they lost to in USC once, it's really crappy. I mean, it's a bad league. And so they get a lot of rest. They get to run up and down. Hey, offensively, they may be, if not the best one. They're certainly one of the best. But I truly believe when you're going forward in the tournament, you got to play well both sides, because we'll talk a few teams that can only play defense, and I have questions about them as well.
Well, let me go ahead and start revealing some of these 2 seeds. That number 5 overall was not UCLA as the top Pac-12 team, but Oregon, who would get that 2 seed in the West. Now, this is a curious thing about seeding, actually. If a Pac-12 team like UCLA or Oregon got to the number 1 line as the 4th 1 seed, they would actually not go into the West region. They end up having to go to the South because of Gonzaga being ahead of them. So, Titel, let me ask you this. Is it advantageous maybe for the Pac-12 team to want to be that top 2 seed and be in the West region as opposed to have to go to Memphis or Kansas City or the like?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I've been asking a lot of my Arizona friends that over the past couple of weekends. I really think that it will be a huge benefit. I think historically, I can't speak for the Ducks, but I think Bruins and Wildcats have done very well in the state of California. I think that either of them would beat Gonzaga just because of Gonzaga's lack of history showing that they never get to the Final Four. I know this is perhaps their best team ever, and they might be on this magical journey. And if they were undefeated, maybe that would change my mind. But I see that they are not perfect. And I think that when they play a top 10, if not top 5 Pac-12 team out West, I don't even know if they're going to be favored, frankly. I really think that they would be an underdog to the Pac-12 champ, whoever it is.
Let's go ahead and go through teams, go through more teams here. Coming in number 6 overall was UCLA, right behind Oregon. But, Matt, as you can see, that they have to go to Kansas City as opposed to San Jose in terms of their region, although both would start out in Sacramento that first weekend.
And I'll actually disagree with Titel. I'd actually rather be playing, say, Kansas as my top seed than Gonzaga, but that's a personal preference of where I rate these teams. But
oh, really?
I think it's one of those be careful what you wish for on the Gonzaga thought. I still think they're really good, and I still rate them personally in my top team. Now, they're like Nova's profiles and Kansas's profiles were strong enough I had to go with them over Gonzaga, but just purely who I think the best team is, it's still Gonzaga in my eyes.
As I said, UCLA will not be playing Kansas if that would have happened. UCLA will not make it to them.
Let me go ahead here. Baylor came in at number 7 overall, also on the 2 line, David, holding on there, a team that has finally corrected a bit of a fall. They were starting to fall apart a little bit, got the huge win over West Virginia at home, though.
Yeah, and that helps stabilize things. Categorically, it's rare to see someone up on the 2 line that isn't number 2 and there's, that's behind someone that's probably not even going to protect it. But you have to look at everything, and Baylor's done quite a bit, and we're not done yet. I mean, they still could pick up a big win or 2 or 3 in their last game of the season, and then the Big 12 tournament after that.
Number 8 overall was the Kentucky Wildcats. I think this is the highest we've had them in quite a while. Stalika, is this where you had Kentucky, or would you agree with this?
I would have them on my 3 line, and I would actually have them below Arizona, Louisville, and Duke, and also Butler, which are teams that we have not mentioned yet.
All right, let's go ahead and pull up that Kentucky profile then, and you take a look at this. They are 25-5 overall. Their RPIs in number 8. Matt, all of their ratings there are in the top 10 now. Even the BPI is lowest at number 10. Do you think this is a 2 seed at this point? Red hot if you look at the actually wins and losses as opposed to scores.
I think it's pretty close. I actually had their in-state neighbor Louisville just ahead of them 8. I did have Kentucky 9. It's pretty close. Kentucky's probably done a little bit more away from home than Louisville, so that might be that'd be like a David Griggs argument why he might say have them 8 and Louisville 9 or 10. But it's close. It wouldn't break my heart either way if you had 8 or 9 here. This isn't one of those like I'm going to vehemently argue either way.
I mean, if we're going to give UCLA grief for beating up on a weaker competition in the Pac-12, what do we say about the leader in the SEC?
Well, wait, I got to take exception with that. You look at these top 50 wins. Titel, let me ask you this. They've got a pile of top 50 wins, way more than UCLA, actually. They've beaten Michigan State and North Carolina in neutral courts as well.
True, but if any of you
half of those teams are good.
Can any of you look me in the eye and say Georgia's the 50th best team in the country? I mean, come on.
Oh,
I'd argue that, actually, but
I can do it. I'd be lying, but you underestimate my ability.
Remember, we're comparing Georgia in this case to the Washington schools or something. The SEC has a lot of NIT teams, for lack of a better word, except for Cal. Give me another NIT team. Maybe Colorado sneaks in. Give me another NIT team for the Pac-12.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and change the screen a little bit here. This is the SEC standings. You have 11 schools in the SEC that are actually in the top 100 in the RPI, which is the most they've ever had at this stage of the season in a long time. Now, it's all sub-NCAA tournament top 100 stuff, but I think you do have a lot more balance in the SEC than we've had in the past.
I suppose.
But anyhow, let's go ahead and let's start looking at the three line here. Butler comes in at number 9 overall, just missing the 2 line and getting to play at Indianapolis despite some very bad losses. John T, do you agree that Butler is on the verge of a 2 seed at this point?
They are rolling. I mean, when you're beating Arizona early in the season and sweeping Villanova and sweeping Xavier and sweeping Marquette, I mean, that's a lot of wins against a lot of good teams. And God forbid, man, playing them in Indianapolis is not going to be any fun, the lower seeds in that bracket.
At number 10 overall, also on the 3 line here, is that Louisville team that we did just mention. Sleek, I think you mentioned them. I guess one of my problems with Louisville is the lack of road wins again.
Yeah, and getting swept against Virginia didn't help, and losing to Wake Forest, they were probably doing them a bit of a favor. But when you look at some of the other wins they have against protected seeds, they've beaten Duke, they've beaten Kentucky, they've also beaten Purdue, and they also beat Wichita, while not a protected seed, still one of the better wins that they'll have. And they also won at Georgia Tech, where many teams in the ACC were failing, but also had pretty decent wins against Miami and Virginia Tech as well. The only reason I don't really have them that much higher is that they don't have quite as many quality wins away from home as other protected seeds would.
Yeah, if I can get the other screen back, I just got to scroll down here. I could pull up that Louisville profile even.
Yeah.
Because I did have I've had this issue with Louisville all season, and it's still there when we're looking now with only 1 regular season game left. When you look at for those top road wins, their best road win is that Georgia Tech win, at a neutral court win over Wichita State. And I have trouble saying that a protected seed should be a protected seed if you can't win at least 1 road game against a NCAA tournament team.
And that's a fair criticism. I actually had Louisville right at number 10, but again, that is lacking, and it was sort of emphasized in a big way the other night when they went to Wake and couldn't get the win.
Well, let's keep moving on here. I will go ahead and reveal the remainder of the 3 lines, starting with the number 11 overall team. Is John Titel, your Arizona Wildcats, on the 3 line, falling a little bit below the top of the 3 line at this point. And at number 12 overall is Duke. Joby, your thoughts on the 3 line as it is?
I think it's a pretty solid 3 line. I've heard that I actually had Louisville below Duke, believe it or not. Duke had that hiccup. The key is if Jefferson's healthy, Duke's real, and I think Duke's gelling right now. That preseason number 1 team that most of us, especially, and I was very outspoken on this, that Duke, I thought they'd be much better overall this year. I mean, we're talking Kentucky from 2 years ago good. They're not that, but they actually do have the talent, and they're starting to gel, and Grayson Allen's not tripping people. A cheap shot, but I had to say it. watch out for the Blue Devils. They might not win in Chapel Hill this weekend because, after all, North Carolina we do have on our one line. But Duke could be, if their inside game starts playing, they could be with Jefferson. They could be real serious.
Let's take a look into the four line here. Matt, let me start with you. The Florida Gators, the second SEC team behind Kentucky, now 2 lines below them after losing to them last week.
Yeah, that's where 5 spots on the S curve for this could be 2 lines, and I think 4 or 5 spot difference is fair. It just so happens this has to be the top of a new seed line. That I think, if Florida won that game, they very well might have been that number 8 spot themselves, but they also, I think, could have really used a road win like that.
I agree with that. Yeah, had they won that game, I'd certainly have them ahead of Kentucky if they had.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Titel, Florida State coming in at number 14 overall there on the 4 line as well. And this is a team that, quite frankly, I think we may be starting to overrate a little bit the way they've been playing lately.
Certainly trending down. If you're going to beat Florida and Virginia and Duke and Notre Dame and Louisville, you're going to be a top 4 seed, I think.
I see that, but you've also got the 3 losses on the road to teams that are either not going to be in this field, or 4 losses away from home, teams that are either not going to be in this field or barely make it, like Syracuse.
I agree, and that's why they're not a 1 seed, but I think that there's just too much quality on the left side, and losses, I understand bad losses, they're not a 1 seed, but I think 4 is a pretty good spot for them because of the balance of the losses and the wins.
Okay. Let me go ahead and swing back over to the bracket one more time, and Stalika, I'll bring in here for the 15 seed, who was Purdue, your Big Ten leader now. We finally get a Big Ten team in, although all the way down here on the 4 line.
Yeah, they're up by a couple games, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, their best win is still going to be against Notre Dame and Indianapolis, which was part of the Crossroads Classic. I mean, they've also beaten Michigan State and Maryland, although, as the puppet has noted, those games are not as difficult as they would be most seasons. But I guess another thing that's also keeping Purdue up is, while they don't have as many wins against the field, they also have plenty of second-level wins. If you look at teams like Iowa, at Ohio State, a sweep of Indiana, even a win against Illinois, which is starting to loom a little bit bigger.
Finishing out our protected seeds of top 16 teams, the Virginia Cavaliers sneaking back in there. Joby, your team fresh off of the win over Carolina, getting back into protected seed range. Do you agree?
Well, this is when I was talking about teams that need to play well on both sides of the court. I think you knew I was referring to this team. Virginia can beat anybody with that defense. I mean, they held North Carolina to the lowest point total in the Roy Williams era. Think about that. Lowest point total since before Dean Smith won a national title. So we're talking pre-Michael Jordan levels of great defense. Yeah, and it's even in the losses that Virginia's had, Miami, it was an overtime game in the 40s. And so the defense is there. What Virginia found is that Kyle Guy has scored close to 20 points in 2 straight games. They found an option there, but can Guy do that over and over again? Other teams are going to start to really double up. Maybe it opens up for Shayok and Parentes if that happens. But the fact of the matter is, there's still an offensive issue. That's why Virginia has the opposite issue that UCLA does.
Let me ask you this, Joby, just out of curiosity. If the Hoos were still playing at the old University Hall, which had much worse shooting backgrounds, how much would North Carolina have scored in that one?
Yeah. Yeah, because it was a round background for folks who weren't.
It was a roundhouse, kind of like Wichita State. And, UCLA probably would have scored more than 40 points, yet they're not on the 1 line and North Carolina is. I just wanted to point that out.
But UCLA would have scored 40, but even the poor Virginia offense would have possibly scored 80.
It would have been much better.
It would have been more entertaining. We don't rank on entertainment. We rank on quality. I will give you that ball is an amazing, entertaining.
All right,
We-
let's go ahead and from here on out. I'm
We
gonna
need to
start
get
here-
Louisville and Kentucky in the same region.
No, they're not in the same region, thankfully, this
You
time
need to-
around.
you
At
need
least
to
this
move
time
it.
around. We do have some interesting matchups there, such as Louisville, UCLA, Kansas, all in the same region, if you look at that. But let's go ahead and reveal the entire 5-line here. Matt, let me turn to you here. We've got Wisconsin, Notre Dame, West Virginia, and Minnesota on the 5-line. Any surprises for you?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised Wisconsin and Minnesota ahead of maybe I'd actually prefer the two American teams here, Cincy and SMU.
Why?
I don't think the Big Ten's any good, and I think SMU and Cincy are actually better teams at this point than Minnesota and Wisconsin.
No.
David, you want to rebut that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're not as good as Minnesota and Wisconsin. A team that's not up here that I really, really liked, I didn't have them as a protected seed, but I had them close, was Iowa State. I mean, when you compare them to this West Virginia, so to speak, I know West Virginia had the big win at Virginia, but Iowa State's higher in the standings. Iowa State's won some huge games in conference. Yeah, if we can pull them up there.
Yeah, would you like to show I can pull up the Iowa State profile right now. This is a team that is playing very very good basketball right now.
Yeah, and just had a big win the other night, albeit at home, over a really good Arizona team. But when you see that the win at Oklahoma State,
they didn't beat
and
Arizona.
the win at Kansas,
They didn't. beat
I just think
Arizona.
that it beats what West Virginia's did. What's that?
They did not beat Arizona this week.
I didn't say that. Did I say?
Yep.
Yes, that's exactly
Yeah.
what you said.
Okay, Chad, we got to start over.
I mean, the
Yes,
only
sir.
reason Iowa State's not going to be much higher at this point is because almost all their work has been done in the Big 12. Because if you look at what they've done outside of that, really their best win was against Miami in the Old Spice Classic. And otherwise, you probably have to look at Mount St. Mary's as their best win non-conference, besides Miami.
Why don't you? Can I ask you that question that Slika just threw out there? Do you want to penalize Iowa State because they don't have the non-conference wins, but they did so much in a very tough Big 12?
Chad, you should feel free to ask me anything you'd like. As far as your question, beating Kansas and Baylor is something that not a lot of teams have done this year. I think Jonas is right in terms of if you have a great in-conference strength of schedule, but a below-average non-conference strength of schedule, that should keep you maybe a seed below what you should be. But I think that 5, 6, 7 is a good range for the Cyclones, and they're really getting better at the right time. I mean, not that I want to play anybody at the top of the Big 12 because it's so loaded, but who would want to play the Cyclones this month? They just look so good.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and David, let me pull up for you here. Here's the 6th line. The 3 teams we were just discussing: Cincinnati, SMU, Iowa State, all making it along with Maryland. Any thoughts on this?
It's pretty close. I don't have anybody.
And I know Slika's laughing about the idea that Cincinnati's going to be playing Butler in Indianapolis. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
And welcome to the tournament. I wish my team was playing Butler in Indianapolis. But,
that's not. I got to tell you, that's not the best matchup. That just potential second round.
No,
matchup
it's not.
Field.
yeah.
They're burning couches in College Park.
Yeah, I mean, I can't cry foul here too much. The only team that I didn't have this line or higher, I think, is next. I had next in line. So I think that it's pretty close to accurate. Wisconsin is a team that I did not have up here. I had them one line down, and it's just when you look at their paper, it's not quite as good. And when you watch them play recently, they're not even playing as well as their paper. But I didn't have them further down much. I think I had them 25th overall.
Well, we are recording this around 10 o'clock right now on Thursday evening. As we record this, Wisconsin's losing at home to Iowa, but that game is
Right.
final, wasn't considered in this. But Chobe, you were looking at a potential second round matchup. in the West Virginia.
Maryland Duke, the rivalry renewed. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Fun game that would be. Just absolutely. And for those who don't know, Maryland, in the rivalry got so intense, at least from the Maryland side. It's maybe a one-sided one in that regard because Duke obviously has Carolina first and foremost. But Maryland, before every Duke game, they decided to hold a bonfire because it didn't matter if Maryland won, they burn the town down. They lose, they burn the town down. I mean, and when I say burn the town down, There are people in College Park businesses who could not get insurance because after every game, windows were smashed and couches were burned. After every one. It was like, oh, Duke game, burn it down. So then they have to hold a bonfire to get the get the arson instincts out of them. It was just hilarious in this regard. But yeah, intensity, fun. And Maryland, as a quick fact, no other team has more top 100 away wins than Maryland. 7. Very impressive. Watch out for the Terps a little bit away from home.
Yeah, well, their losses will come at home basically this year. But John T., the 7 line here: Miami, Oklahoma State, Creighton, and St. Mary's. Do you like it? Do you think there's any glaring omissions here?
Nothing glaring. I think maybe a couple weeks ago I'd have South Carolina around here, but talk about trending downward. Certainly the Dayton VCU game produced a great game and a great Dayton team, so I think they're in the mix. But I don't have too many problems with this line, so I would go with no veto.
Okay. And Matt, I know you're big on both West Coast Conference teams. St. Mary's, do you think that this is where they belong at a 7 line?
I actually think they belong 1 line higher, especially over Maryland. But
well, no, we're not moving that game.
Well, Maryland's not making it to that game in the first place. But hey.
Okay, and somebody's drawing on our screen here. It's probably Stalika. Not LA.
I did not. I swear to God, when I said UCLA doesn't want to play a team like Oklahoma State, that I did not know the bracket. I swear to God, I was just saying, what's a team in the 7 line area that they might play that's going to be tough? Oh, maybe Oklahoma State. I swear to God, but yes, I would if I was filling out my bracket. Cowboys in the Sweet 16.
And Stalika, let's go ahead and conclude the top half of the bracket here. The 8 line, we've got South Carolina, Northwestern, Dayton, and Virginia Tech. The Dayton team that we just mentioned, as well as South Carolina, Vatech, and Northwestern filling it out.
Yeah, I think you know which one I'm going to be circling right here, and that's the party in Greenville, where I guess North Carolina would be at somewhat of a home court disadvantage in the second round, but that's one they should still win comfortably. But I think another one that we have to highlight is going to be Northwestern getting into the field for the first time. And after their win against Michigan last night, I think fans from Chicago can go ahead and start making their travel plans.
Yeah, and Tytel, I wasn't able to get the video for it, but it was apps to show on right now. But how about the finish of that game last night between Northwestern and Michigan?
I will have to describe it verbally, which is going to lose a lot in the translation, but it's worth talking about. He's going to throw this pass, and Derek Walton is fronting Pardon. So instead of Leitner, who's got Jimenez behind him, or Tate George, who's kind of just waiting for it from Scott Burrell, he has to throw it like 85 feet, to go over Walton, but not too far over Pardon, because if it goes out of bounds, it comes back with 1.7 seconds left. The Wolverines right under their own basket. The shot itself was nice, but the pass was incredible. I mean, it wasn't in the NCAA tourney. It wasn't even in the Big Ten tourney, but it really is one of the best passes I've ever seen. I know it's recency bias. I know that I haven't seen every pass ever thrown. It was incredible.
I'll tell you that my thought on it was it's a pass that we see attempted a lot, actually. Unfortunately, normally goes over everybody's head and gives the other team, Michigan in this case it would have been, a inbounds under their own basket with a shot to win the game. So it's a dangerous pass that I've often criticized teams for trying to make that play in a tie game. But this time it worked, and it probably gave Northwestern their first ever NCAA tournament bid. In fact, we locked them in on our survival board last night.
It was just a great game to watch. I mean, the people at the game knew what was at stake. You saw people in the stands praying and crying and so intense. And just for that outpouring of emotion after an amazing, amazing play. And like Tytel said, it wasn't an NCAA tournament or Big Ten tournament game, but it was a rather historic win because I think that cemented them in. It locked them in. Here they are on the top half of our bracket, and they have 2 more games, and even if they lose both of them, they're not falling out.
Court storming allowed, Chad? Or take it off your lawn?
No, you can't court storm unless it's Colorado State, Wyoming, and we went into that last night. But,
yeah. I hope one of those teams is in the field, although I'm sure neither is.
But, Matt, the 9 line, we're actually going to see some potential first-round matchups showing up here. There is your Marquette team playing South Carolina, a game they could definitely win. Michigan, Arkansas, and Wichita State on this line.
That's actually, I think, exactly what my 9 line looked like. And I think fairly close, especially when I had Seton Hall as my team number 37. I think there might be a little bit of separation here, even from the 9 line that we've seen all year, about top 32 or so teams. And now I think these next 4 have a little separation over the teams on the 10, 11, and 12 lines.
I'm not big on Michigan at all.
John T., let me ask you about Wichita State. Jerry Palm has been saying for the last month or so that Wichita State is not going to make it in the field if they don't win the automatic bid. Do you agree with that, or do you think that this Wichita State, which has some amazing metrics, this team belongs in?
We have to look at the strength of schedule because that's the only thing keeping them out. They only have 1 top 50 win and 2 top 100 wins, which says a lot about their schedule. Like, nobody wants to play them because, as we've seen from Greg Marshall, like, he wins every year. When you look at the 4 losses, though, all in the top 50, so 4 teams that would agree to schedule them all beat them most handily. The Michigan State game was 5 points. I think they're in. The only thing stopping them is the strength of schedule.
Well, Matt, let me ask you about them as well, because you are a fan of the predictive metrics. If you go by KenPom, they should be a 3 seed, right?
And then I had them on the 9 line just because their profile is fairly barren. As a team, I think realistically like a 5 or 6 seed level team, and hey, if the committee wants to go bold and give them something like that, you're not gonna hear me complaining. And I think you'll hear teams on the 1 and 2 line that'll be cheering that they don't have to see them until late in the tournament.
Yeah,
A little bit of trivia: the last time Gonzaga got a 6 seed, a 1 seed, number 9 seeded Wichita State knocked them out en route to the Final Four.
That's right.
So.
But Salika, you had a comment also about them?
Well, actually, a couple of comments. Number one, Kansas has to be pleased to not see Wichita State in there because you can't really match up Northwestern and Michigan.
What? Well, all the more reason Michigan should not be up here.
Yeah.
But the second thing I was going to also add was Wichita State fans are probably going to have another bone to pick with Jerry Palm because I remember him saying last year he wasn't real bullish on them getting in because of their injuries back then to, I think it was Fred Van Vliet.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's. Was playing in the tournament. Can we pull up Michigan? I mean, I just don't see what they've done that's all that hard to do. Which, again, you asked me at the top of the show what I look at. What's Michigan done that's hard?
Michigan has won 19 games. That's not easy. They've won 9 games in the Big Ten. That's not easy. But let's actually get the real profile here. They have the neutral court win over SMU that I think you may be overlooking a bit, David. Also, the neutral court win over Marquette, who we just put out on the same line here.
Yeah, but okay, they have the win against SMU, but they beat Michigan State at home. These aren't necessarily like strong road teams that they're beating here.
I think that the value to those 2 neutral court wins is what makes them clearly a tournament team. And if you're clearly a tournament team, you're around the 9 line right now.
Well, you're wrong. You're wrong, and you're denying us a Wichita State-Kansas matchup. But other than that, great show, Chad.
Tytel, I think you get a little bit of a comment here about this Dayton-Michigan game. There's going to be some trouble for some people cheering for this one.
It's talk about the enemy of my enemy is my enemy. Like, if you're a Buckeyes fan, I'll defer to John S. Like, who on earth do you cheer for in this game?
Oh, that's easy. You cheer for Dayton because it seems like half the Flyer fans are Ohio State football fans. I mean, I'll put it to you this way. They would rather cheer for Frank Haith and Tulsa than they would for Michigan last year.
Yeah. Dayton hates Ohio State. I think Ohio State is vaguely aware that Dayton is there.
Let's go ahead and show the 10 line here. We're getting closer to the end of the field. Michigan State, Seton Hall, VCU, and Providence. Joby, your thoughts on this line?
I am a big and Matt's kind of also been there too with me, but he's got the Big East glasses. I have those Big East glasses on as well. Like this line. I like Seton Hall as a 10. I like Providence, and I think I might have put Providence in as the last 9 even on mine. Providence is playing awesome. Their last 4 games, they continue this. They're a team nobody wants to mess with, and who would have thought you would have said that just 3 weeks ago? VCU, let's talk VCU. That was not a performance for the ages last night. And
It was against Dayton, though. I
it
mean,
was against Dayton, but VCU, they've played and lost a lot of very close games. I think they're in the field, don't get me wrong. But their resume is not exactly stellar. They have less, even than like your Providences on this line and Michigan State on this line. Dayton has so little room for error. They cannot go out early in the A-10. I truly believe that.
I think Dayton's pretty much.
They could open the door to someone else.
well, Titel, do you agree with that? Do you think that after back-to-back losses here, VCU is in a ton of trouble and desperately needs to beat George Mason at least this weekend?
If they were losing like at home at St. Louis, push the panic button. If you're losing on the road to Rhode Island and Dayton, sucks, but not the end of the world.
I didn't think they were that good to begin. I mean, there's teams I like more than VCU. I think I had VCU in, but
I'm going to move over to the 11 line here. I'm going to start by revealing only 3 of the teams because the 4th spot will be one of our first 4 spots. But in the 11 line, we do see Middle Tennessee, USC, and the last team to avoid the first 4 is the Xavier Musketeers. We teased this at the top of the show.
You are a merciful panel indeed, so thank you for not sending us to Dayton.
Well, we had a very large discrepancy in voting on Xavier. Titel, you had them a little higher than this. David, you didn't even have them in your top 50 at all.
I had them number 51.
Okay.
And yes, I don't. Okay, let's get Xavier's profile up here. I will demonstrate what my issue with Xavier is.
Do we have room for other losses? I'm not sure if we have enough room.
Yes, I mean, there's that. So we look at this profile and we see a home win against Wake Forest, who I think has maybe it's 3 or 4 road wins on the year, and none of them are good. A home win against Seton Hall. Win at Creighton is nice. And then everything else is holding serve against NIT caliber teams or worse at home. And so we don't have a profile that looks all that good. And then when you watch them play, they look even worse.
Well, John T., I know you've submitted your bracket before the Marquette loss. So what is your thoughts on Xavier now? I mean, are they about to fall off the field?
It's the same argument as last Thursday. So my recollection is that I kept saying they keep losing, but it's because of the injuries and that people leaving the team. And David keeps saying, well, they keep losing and keep losing with no excuse. And I'm like, there is this excuse. I mean, you can't have it both ways. Only one of us is right. If you think David's right, then they're going to miss the field. But I really think that when you're missing huge pieces of your puzzle, that works in your favor. Even if it shouldn't, I think it does.
But the problem is that piece of the puzzle is not coming back this year. And, I mean, all they would be doing is holding serve against someone like DePaul. So if they lose either one of those games, they're toast.
Well, and that was the thing, John. Like, don't they kind of evaluate you for who you are when you're going into the tournament? And
What are you guys, doctors?
I don't know. Yes. Well, there was an incident in med school I won't talk about.
Well, let's keep moving here. And Matt, let me show you here our first game of the first 4. This is on the 11 seed line, Syracuse and Illinois, the top 2 of the first 4 teams. And how about the Illini suddenly in our field?
I just had them out, but it's not, I think, horrible to have them in. I will say, speaking of games you can't lose, but I think that's on the plate, Illinois is not a lock to win at Rutgers. Not like Rutgers, if nothing else, is pretty feisty. They play hard most every game. Hasn't resulted in a ton of wins, but like, while Xavier at DePaul is a banana peel, I really think this game at Rutgers is. And given John Gross's overall tenure, would not stun me in the least if they lost it.
I mean, if Chris Berman used to call Detroit head coach Wayne Fontes the Rasputin of the NFL, couldn't John Gross be the same thing in the Big Ten?
But you look at this, Joby, you look at this, 4 out of 5 wins, including a sweep of Northwestern, Michigan State, at Iowa, who is playing a lot better recently. Talk talk about a team that came out of nowhere.
And they even have that little nice little neutral court win over a team that beat the number one team in the country in BYU. All of a sudden, that's not looking I'm not saying, oh, that's amazing, but it's just yet another little notch. When we're looking at the bubble, especially this year's bubble, there are warts all over the place. Obviously, I'd love for Illinois to have a better overall record. And specifically in the Big Ten, they have a losing record in the Big Ten. But when you look at their wins, I don't think they have a loss outside the top 100 of the RPI. They have maybe even a boring resume, but boring resumes that are rock solid, I dare say, but boring, are going to get you in this field this year.
Chad, pull up Syracuse. Get them up here.
Let's go ahead.
Not a boring resume.
Not a boring resume. This is the other team that we had matched up.
Get them. I want to, I just hope that I'm a good enough wordsmith to properly express how awful I think this selection is. Now, to be fair, I think the committee will take them. But there's a few problems here. One is the RPI. It's in the 70s. The other is when you look at their quality wins, they're all at home. And Duke has a losing road record. Miami, losing road record. Wake, especially losing road record. Florida State, losing road record. So I'm not seeing anything special there. And when you look at their – what's that?
Virginia doesn't. Virginia's been good on the
Yeah, Virginia is the one that doesn't.
Of course, it was in the middle of the weird loss, and it was an overtime loss, but yeah.
Yes, so there's that. And then when you look at what they've done on the road, there's just nothing to look at. I don't.
And UConn, St. John's, BC. Wow, that's.
Yeah, I just don't get it with this team. Now they're going to get in because the committee likes to annoy me, and Syracuse will probably advance to the Final Four once they've been selected. But they shouldn't be selected. I mean, honestly, this is. I think that one of the things that people look at is they get enamored with these top 50 wins, and they're not willing to look at things a little closer and realize, well, yeah, but they came at home against teams that have losing road records, which isn't quite – you have to at least note that. That's not saying that you need to dismiss them entirely, but there's nothing really here that's all that impressive.
Let me go ahead and show the last two.
3 protected seeds, even if it wasn't home. You beat 3 protected seeds. That's impressive. I'm sorry.
No,
even at home.
I'm with Joby on this. I think
they lost to Boston College.
I think this is why you have
the Johnnies by 30. There's a few problems here.
Okay, let's go ahead and Titel. Our last 2 teams that made the field in this consensus bracket, Illinois State and Wake Forest. You shocked? Do you agree with it?
I am neither shocked nor do I agree with it. That's the third option. The Redbirds, I think I do have them in my field, so that does not shock me. As far as Wake Forest, an argument can be made. I still think that a 4th in the Pac-12 team like Cal has an advantage over a 10th or 11th in the ACC like Wake. I don't think it's a bad pick to do Wake there, which is why I'm not shocked. But I think they're maybe a win or 2 away from getting up to that level.
Well, let me show you the top 4 teams out. Vanderbilt, Kansas State, the Cal team you mentioned, and Georgia Tech, another ACC team. And I understand
Georgia Tech.
That Cal argument with 10 wins already in the Pac-12, they could have 12 of them if they can sweep this week, tonight and Saturday. Matt, despite the fact that they only have 1 top 50 win, should Cal be in here maybe?
No, because basically they could not beat the top 3 teams in their conference. Like all of these teams, even in the bubble, like Syracuse beat some of the top ACC teams. Illinois swept Northwestern. What has Cal done? Not beating a good team. And they're not I think they're in the 40s or 50s in the metrics. So it's I don't even think they're that good of a team anyway. And you've basically proven you can't beat tournament teams.
Right. 4 other teams that did receive votes for at-large bids included Rhode Island, Houston, Stalika did that before they lost tonight, so we'll just take a look at that. Georgia and TCU actually did receive some consideration as well. Not necessarily to be in the field, but to be near the field. Okay. David, I know you want to mention them also. It's a couple of teams that did receive votes to have been within the field, but got in anyhow as automatic bids. included here we go Texas Arlington and UNC Wilmington as well. They will both be on the 12 line. Actually, finishing out the 12 line would be Nevada. But let me run through each of you now that we at least have the at-larges and the also considered. Is there a change you would make to put one of these 8 teams in as opposed to one of the last teams out? Matt, let me start with you.
The one I actually might argue for a little bit is Kansas State, and that they have a little bit of a top-heavy profile, but I think winning last night in Conti Forum was big for them. To, I think, get them. I would have them in the first 4, but I would have them in the field, probably over Illinois. So, Illinois fans, you're going to love me on that one.
Right.
Did you say Connie Forum?
Is that? I think that's what, at least that's what TCU's building.
No, that's Boston College.
Oops.
Yeah, no.
Well, they didn't play Boston College.
They can't win a Connie for them. They got it.
Yeah.
They're Syracuse.
Yeah. Actually, Joby, let me ask you also. I know Ty, you already mentioned Cal, but over Wake, but Joby.
No, the one you're gonna roll your eyes. My last team in, and I'm willing to give up the ghost, are the Yellow Jackets. I'm the reason they're there. They still got the they righted the ship the last couple of games. They're going to need to perform. They're going to need to win against Syracuse this weekend.
Please,
actually, that could be an elimination game. Very well. But
Joby, the guy's 93.
Can I purchase some Yellow Jackets gear if that's an elimination game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm banging that drum. They have those great wins. North Carolina's now 1 seed, for goodness sakes. And they need to win not this weekend, and they need to win their first game in the ACC tournament. But if they do those 2 things, I think they should be in, no questions asked, on Sunday.
Okay. And Sleek, I didn't get your thoughts on this, and then we'll show the rest of the bracket as well.
Thoughts on the first 4 right here?
Yeah.
No, I think I would have gone with Illinois State along with Illinois, although I actually would not have had Syracuse in, but since we already have Wake Forest in.
Okay. Let's go through. David, let me get your thoughts on the next lines here. The 13 line.
I liked Vanderbilt, by the way. But
I'm sorry, I forgot you. Go ahead and want to make the case for Vanderbilt also. I did just reveal the 13 line, though.
Right, yeah, but I just like them more than – I mean, they have the win at Florida. They have the win at Arkansas. And I think that everybody is categorically looking at the number of losses they have. But they have that many losses against the toughest schedule in the country. Like, had they played the 10th toughest schedule in the country, they'd probably have 2 or 3 fewer losses. So I think you have to factor that in. And they almost won at Rupp the other night. They're playing really well. If they get this final game against Florida, I know it's at home, but they've already won at Florida. If they get that one and they pick up another one against Arkansas or South Carolina, or 2 like that perhaps in the SEC tournament, that's how well they're playing. I think they're getting in with all 15 losses.
Let's go ahead and show the rest of the field here. I showed the 13 line. 14 line, we see Bucknell, Oakland, Alec Peters out for the season for Valparaiso. It's changed our pick to win the Horizon League, along with Akron, who's kind of falling apart, and Belmont there. Yeah. On the 15 line, what happened here? That did not work.
You eliminated my team. I know they could lose.
I just took Virginia off. There we go. We got North Dakota, Bakersfield, Gulf Coast, and Winthrop on the 15 line. And the 16 seeds being South Dakota, Texas Southern, Mount St. Mary's, Irvine, NC Central against New Orleans.
New Orleans, I'm telling you.
I think given today's events, if Winthrop can't get out of the Big South this year, that conference winner is going to Dayton.
Yeah.
Now we got a full bracket out there and everything. I'm going to run through each of you, ask you for any other final thoughts for the evening, as well as any final comments on the bracket. And Joby, let me start with you.
I had to start with me. It'll be very interesting. We've talked about it all year right now, and we have it listed now officially. Depending where we put middle, there are only 10 conference champs in the at-large field. That is extremely low. That also means less bid stealing. The bid stealing will have to come from the paired up conferences of West Coast, A10, and American. Thus, and 2 teams will have to be eliminated to steal a bid. We're going to see the fewest stolen bids out of the mid-tier conferences than we ever have before.
Well, the Missouri Valley could as well, although I think
Missouri Valley, excuse me. Yeah,
I think it could be Illinois State gets knocked out if they don't win it, though. So that's
right. I think Illinois State, I truly do believe, has to win it out, and so I apologize on that. But yeah, Wichita State, is going to be seeing this field. Right.
Stalika.
Yeah, Illinois State certainly needs to beat Evansville tomorrow, and whoever they play in the semis, which I think, as we'll get to later tonight, is probably going to be Southern Illinois. But I'm also struck by one of the things Chad said before we went on the air. This is one of the few times, at least since I've been part of the committee, where there seems to be quite the consensus on the top 32 teams, or teams that are likely going to be part of our first ballot when we convene next week with the annual Hoops HD selection committee.
Matt.
I guess to kind of continue along that thought, I think going into the conference tournament, everyone thinks this field, it can move a lot, you do that. I think the field is a lot closer to be set against stone than most people think. There'll be a little bit of movement here and there, maybe a seed line or two, but I think what we're starting to see for the field is pretty close to the field that'll be revealed March 12th.
All right, Titel, you agree with that? Any other final thoughts from you?
So I'm going to do a final thought that's not totally bracket related. So a couple weeks ago, UNC Asheville was 22-7, and they had swept Campbell. Then they lost to Gardner Webb by 5 before beating Liberty to finish at 15-3 in conference, entering the Big South tourney today. All they had to do was hold 5'9" guard Chris Clemens 47 points. He would have won by 2. Instead, he scored 51 points in 37 minutes, and they lost by 2, and now they're done. That's why we love conference tournament.
Yeah. And a little facts about that 51 points. That was actually the highest point total ever in a Big South game in Big South history. Not just conference Big South tournament, any Big South game ever. Also a school record for Campbell. Just an amazing game. David, your thoughts?
I just watched UTEP win at the buzzer on a tip-in. So, and then they waved it off. Yeah. So that was a fun highlight to think. That's my final thought, just tipping it in. But in all seriousness, when you look at some of the teams, yeah, I know they lost the game. Like when you look at some of the teams, like on the 12 line, I think that those are almost as dangerous, if not more so, than teams on the 11 line. If the bracket holds serve and the chalk holds and they're able to get through, because like Texas Arlington, they've won at St. Mary's, they've won at Georgia Southern, they've won at Georgia State. They've won games that are hard to win, and if they aren't inside the bubble but make the tournament, it means most likely they will have won at College of Charleston as well.
All right. Well, I guess
that's not UT Arlington. That's UNC. Chad, we got to start over.
That'll be UNC Wilmington is playing at College of Charleston, playing in Charleston, at least in the Colonial Tournament. Arlington's tournament's down in New Orleans. The Sun Belt tournament won't be done until the end of next week. But I do want to take a chance here to thank everybody for joining us. We will be having another podcast come. Actually, if you want to look below us here, you can see the final bracket that we just went over. If you look up there, sometime at least Friday, we'll also have another Championship Week video notebook. We'll have more video notebooks all week. We're probably going to have a bracket rundown show next week as well. But on behalf of David Griggs, Matt Sikowski, John Titel, Joby Fortson, John Salika, and anyone else that's around here, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again real soon.